The meeting of the Committee on Legislation, Rules, and Policies of the Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Herndon?
Present.
Director Jackson is absent at the moment. Director O'Halloran?
Here.
Director Vanoy?
Present.
And Chair Zomber.
Present.
We have a quorum.
The Chair will now ask the Secretary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The Chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so and asks those who do not wish to participate, please remain silent during the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being conducted from the Central Services Building. This meeting may also be accessed via the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta de la Mesa Directiva de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799 e introduzca el número de reunión 832-0725-4267, seguido por el símbolo de número. Luego, introduzca el código 883149, seguido por el símbolo de número. Nuevamente, para escuchar esta reunión en español, llame al 312-626-6799 e introduzca el número de reunión 832-0725-4267, seguido por el símbolo de número. Luego, introduzca el código 883149, seguido por el símbolo de número.
For each of our items of business, we will hold a discussion and public hearing. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker slip and bring it to our Secretary, Dr. Owen Moore. We have no virtual speakers registered. The committee will accept public comments on tonight's agenda items. Speakers may only address the item for which they have registered. Questions from the public may not be answered during the public comment period. Following public comment, the committee will begin its discussion and no additional comments will be accepted. When you are called upon to speak, please state your name and spell your last name for the record. For the sake of fairness and to give everyone a chance to speak, the chair reserves the right to limit the length of time allowed to any one speaker. Written testimony will be accepted for transmittal to the board. Send this testimony to the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53201, or fax to 414-475-8071, or email it to governance@milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictates that all comments, questions, and requests should be directed to the chair of the committee, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. The board appreciates and encourages stakeholder input and assumes that members of the public will participate in a civil manner. Conduct that prevents the good order of the meeting will not be tolerated. Anyone who engages in behavior that persistently disrupts the meeting may be removed from the meeting. Anyone ejected from the meeting may continue to listen to the meeting or access the agenda items online. However, the individual will not be allowed to rejoin the meeting. Also, no one other than members of the board, designated staff, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the Meetings, Agendas, and Minutes page of the MPS website. Now let's begin. Madam Secretary, item 1.
Madam Chair, we were just noting that we have several students in the audience also, so we were wondering if you might want to move that item to the first for the student representative. Item 3.
Sure, we can move item 3 up.
Okay. Then,
So then I will go to
Item 3 is action on a request to reaffirm Administrative Policy 8.18, Student Involvement in Decision-Making. The recommendation is that the board reaffirm Administrative Policy 8.18.
Would the administration please present the item?
Chair Zombor, Brenda Cassellius, Superintendent, and members of the board. Per Board Governance Policy 2.11, every fifth year, the board and its designees shall revisit all of its policies, rules, and procedures to determine their coherence and appropriateness to the present mission of the district. This evening, the administration recommends the board reaffirm Administrative Policy 8.18, Student Involvement in Decision-Making. We make this recommendation because it is important to maintain policies involving student voice. When students are involved in decision-making, they feel a greater sense of ownership, responsibility, and belonging with their school communities and the district as its whole. Their voices bring incredibly fresh perspectives, lived experiences, and innovative ideas that we may sometimes overlook. Empowering students in this way not only builds critical leadership skills, but also fosters a culture of respect and collaboration. By involving students in decision-making process, we gain a deeper insight and make more informed, effective decisions that truly reflect the needs of the district and school communities. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to members of the public who wish to make comments first, and then we'll go to committee members. So first we have Manuel Ishag, and then Owen Driscoll. So you have to correct me on the pronunciation of your last name.
Good afternoon, President Zombor, Dr. Casilius, members of the committee. My name is Manuel Ishag, I-S-H-A-G. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on this issue of the utmost importance. I truly appreciate all of the work that's been done to further the student voice in the district. The research on student voice has been clear and consistent. Students, when they feel they are engaged and heard, perform better, both academically and socially. Of course, I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard before and you don't already believe. I believe this policy is a step in the right direction. My main objective in being here today is to give you some perspective on the student reception of this policy. As a leader of the SSAC for the last 3 years, I know what it means to ask a student to make a big commitment. And as someone who's greatly involved at my school, I understand how busy a student's schedule can be. I have 2 main suggestions for this bill. First, I would amend the policy to state that the student doesn't have to be at every single meeting, but rather the student or the board could request the presence of the student if they feel that it would be beneficial or productive. Although I do think a minimum number of meetings attended per year would make sense because it's important for the student to actually be there and make the commitment. Secondly, I would ask that you consider the level of commitment we're asking of a student versus the prospective return. The student would have to give up a lot of time and they would have to remain incredibly dedicated for a year to this role. But that student could simply come to a committee meeting, as I'm doing today, and provide public testimony to seemingly the same result, because with no power to vote or make a motion, there's really no incentive for that student. So I would also like to mention that the current dynamic we have between the students and the board, I think, is a very good one. I like that the board members come into the SSAC and we get to have that direct, sometimes informal, but very productive conversation. And I thank you guys for doing that. I very much support the implementation of this policy, and I think it's the natural continuation of where we're going as a district. So thank you for that. And it's been an honor to serve as a student leader in the district for the past 3 years, and I really do think we're going in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your service on the SSAC. Owen Driscoll, and then Lucas Weir.
Owen Driscoll, D as in David, R-I-S-C-O-L-L. Good evening, Dr. Casilius, President Zombor, members of the committee. I'm very excited that this topic has once again resurfaced. Now more than ever, it is critical to enhance community engagement and support, and this is just one of many critical steps to improve community engagement and rebuild trust. As this policy emphasizes, students seek meaningful involvement in decisions that shape our education. A student representative would serve as a vital link between policymakers and the thousands of proud MPS students. Too often decisions made without student input miss critical perspectives and thus yield unintended consequences. Including a student voice ensures policies better reflect the needs and experiences of those they impact. To implement this policy, I propose starting small. Appoint one student representative to attend PACE meetings and one student representative to attend LRP meetings. This role would amplify student engagement, raise awareness of board initiatives, and foster trust through open communication. The representative would not hold decision-making power, but would create a valuable feedback loop, promoting accountability and strengthening relationships between the board and the student community. Serving in this role would require significant commitment. Preparing for meetings and gathering peer input demands time and effort. To ensure accessibility, a modest stipend could remove financial barriers, allowing any dedicated student to serve, regardless of their economic background. This initiative is a crucial step forward towards rebuilding community trust and enhancing engagement, and reaffirms the board's commitment to those it serves. Research consistently shows that inclusive decision-making involving those affected by policies leads to more effective outcomes. Thank you for considering this impactful step. By amplifying student voices, we can build a stronger, more inclusive Milwaukee Public Schools together. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your service on the SSAC. All right, Lucas Weir. And Dr. Owenmore, do we have any virtual speakers on this item?
We do not on this item.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead.
Lucas Weir, W-I-E-R-E-R. Good evening, Superintendent Caselius, Director Zombor, members of the board. I just wanted to, first of all, start by thanking the young men that spoke tonight. I think student voice is incredibly important. I did want to pose a couple questions as it relates to student voice within the community. I know after having taught a lot of years at schools that struggle greatly with attendance, I'm wondering if there is any thought being given to how to engage students that maybe do not attend school on a regular basis. Often what we see, and I suspect it's true of the young men here tonight, is it's our most academically gifted students, our most involved students in our school community. But if we are to try to turn around our chronic absenteeism, our attendance rates, our general engagement with school again, we need to also consider students that maybe are not there all the time. And I really appreciate some of the words by the young men that are trying to make this more accessible, acknowledging that student time is very precious and that it's not always possible for them to get to every meeting. So I just want us to consider that. How can we possibly bring in more students that maybe aren't traditionally thought of as leaders within our community? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Director Vanoy.
Just to piggyback on what the gentleman was saying is do we have a virtual option for students as well? Maybe we could have students join us virtually, or I do also like the idea of including other voices, maybe a special education representative or an alternative education representative or something, you know, of our different categories even, or something like that. I don't know how that would work, but, and I love the stipend idea as well, because that could take the place of maybe a student job after school.
Any other comments? Thank you. Director O'Halloran and then Vice President Herndon.
Thank you, President Zombor. So as we're considering the policy, I'm wondering if we can incorporate any of these as process decisions within the SSAC, whether it's, you know, to the point around separating. One will go to PACE, one will go to LRP. If it's a selection, you know, students are selected through the SSAC, is that something, a decision that can be made? And the policy does say that students shall be free to attend. I want to make it clear that if a student is offering up their time, that there's not necessarily a requirement. But I guess just from like moving forward with this idea, can we move forward and perfect along the way and have this start in the fall without necessarily baking things into the policy in order to move forward?
Thank you. Are you proposing possibly maybe amending it so that students are free to attend all non-executive sessions of the board and its committees, maybe of the SSAC's choosing, just to make it more clear, or?
What I'm asking, or I'm just trying to understand, because what I don't want to have happen is if we make a change to the policy and we bake in something, then we have to hold it over for X amount of, I think a policy, okay, no, we don't. I'm seeing shaking of heads. I just want to be clear, because sometimes if we introduce a policy or a procedure, sometimes things have to be held over, and I just don't want to get into.
Madam Chair, members, the only policies that need to be held one cycle are changes to board rules.
Okay,
So this could go into effect upon board approval.
okay. Yeah, I guess to a certain extent, I'm wondering if we can just empower the SSAC to make this decision and run it as they see fit, rather than changing the board policy to say a certain thing. I guess that's more of a question for the committee, and perhaps I'm looking out in the audience at the advisor for the SSAC, but I just don't want to change board policy tonight and then have it come to consideration at the SSAC level and say, well, the board made this decision and we would have liked to go in a different direction. Like, I think to a certain extent, aside from the stipend issue, I think that is a board decision, but how the SSAC decides to elect and delegate their duties, I think that's an SSAC decision as far as I'm concerned, but.
Administration?
Chair Zomber, Director O'Halloran, I think those are all just really good questions to get at some of the concerns that the students brought up about time. I've seen it done many, many different ways in districts. Sometimes there's multiple student reps that are on a board, up to 3, and they might have one who is on the board and then 2 alternates who come, or they may have all 3 and they rotate meetings, so that no one person has too much responsibility for that. I've seen stipends and non-stipends. I support a stipend for the students, which would be great. And also they can get credit. So we can also give high school credit for their role, so they can use it as an elective course. So that's another way to kind of make up time if we have work with a teacher on record who can create a course on citizenship, and it can meet a requirement for that. So that can also be done. I also just wanted to address the limitation of giving public comment by students. Public comment is up to 3 minutes of public comment, where if you have an actual seat on the dais up here, you get to participate in the discussion. You get to ask questions of your other board members and be part of it. Even though you may not have a vote, you still get to influence that vote through your questions and through your discussion on the board. So I think, and you have many, many more minutes than just 3. And I think, I'm not certain, but they may be able to work with other board members and have relationship with other board members to introduce resolutions and bring forth other types of changes that way. So, but I do like Director O'Halloran's suggestion of maybe limiting the changes so much to the policy, but then bringing forward some further discussion with SSAC as they convene next year with new membership, and bring forward some written procedures for how they would participate with the student rep on the board, and how they would share those duties and have representation at the committees and here at the evening meetings as well.
Thank you. Director O'Halloran, do you have any follow-up to that?
I would also like to ask administration to bring forward some ideas for consideration back to the committee, and including, I don't know when it would be, maybe for the October board cycle, maybe budget adjustments about the stipend. I have not seen other districts and how they do it, and so if there are other districts that we can consider, how they, whether it's dollar amounts or the credit, et cetera, I would just be interested to consider that, how we can thank our students for their time and their expertise with more than just applause.
Vice President Herndon?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to zero in on what Mr. Weir had to say about trying to get students involved that typically are not or that are absent from school far too often. I know that it seems like these I'll call it extracurricular activity for lack of a better term, is one of the huge incentives for getting students to want to go to school every day. I also know that there are far too many of our high schools where there is a low attendance rate, and anything that the board can do towards encouraging our students to be present in class daily, the better. So I don't have any ideas at this moment on how to go about that, but I would ask that administration, as we look at making improvements between now and September, as the SSAC works that out, maybe they have some ideas on how we should go about doing this to make sure that students from other schools as well that aren't as active would become active, and that would be beneficial both during the time they're in school and for their future years as well. Thank you.
May I pass the gavel?
I have the gavel.
Thank you. I also agree with your comments about making sure that students, that a wide, variety of students can participate. I think the alternate, like having an option, if the SSAC chooses, is a nice way to also ensure more students can participate, especially if the time commitment gets to be too much, and then that way there's still a student. But I also recognize the SSAC might not choose to do that, but we could amend this policy tonight just to add 2 alternates may be elected by the SSAC so that it's their choice. And then that way there's an opportunity. I also think, we're still doing the Neola work. This isn't one of the Neola policies. So this policy is going to come back again, within the next year. We're going to be, reformatting it for board docs. So I think this is a work in progress. Hopefully we'll see this come forward again 1 or 2 more times in the next year, just so we can fine tune it and make it exactly what helps empower the students the most and gives them the strongest voice possible with the board. So I don't think I can make a motion as a chair, or I can make a motion as a chair. Okay. So I would just make a motion that, thank you. We reaffirm this policy, but also add that 2 alternates may also be elected by the SSAC. And then I could take the gavel back. Director O'Halloran.
Thank you, and I just wanted to make sure that my request for administration to bring back some recommendations, or even if the SSAC convenes and they would like to bring their recommendation to us, I would just like to hear how we can ensure our students are compensated for their time.
Could I add to my motion to include Director O'Halloran's ask of administration? Okay. Thank you. Okay, are
Chair-
there other
Chair-
comments? Oh, administration.
Chair Zomber, do you want to add in there some enabling language around stipend? Just that the board may choose to provide a stipend?
Sure, we can do that.
It's not binding you, it would be allowable enabling language?
So we'll have 2 alternates may also be elected by the SSAC, and the board may choose to allow a stipend for student reps. Madam Secretary, do you think if we do that, do we have to decide by a certain time each year, or we can always cross that bridge when we get there? And I see Ms.
Yeah,
Koala.
we're discussing language over here and saying
Yeah.
that it could be that, that the board could approve a stipend, to
Okay.
allow a stipend to be approved by the board.
Let's go with that. May.
Okay, I'm going to try to repeat this, so feel free to clear it. So on Director Zomber's motion to approve the administration's, to reaffirm the administrative policy 8.18, student involvement in decision-making, and adding the language that two alternatives may be elected by the SSAC, and that a stipend may be approved by the board, and asking that administration bring back a plan to further develop the procedures around appointment.
Okay.
Yes.
That doesn't make it in the policy, though.
No?
That wouldn't make it in the policy, that's separate from the
Okay.
amendments.
Just keep,
I just want to
keep
be
that out.
clear. It's a very clunky policy.
We will take that out of the motion. So on Director Zomber's motion to reaffirm administrative policy 8.18, adding that two alternatives may be elected by the SSAC and that the board may choose to allow a stipend for service.
Before we do the roll call, and does anyone have a question about that before we go to the roll? Okay. Madam Secretary.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Benoit.
Aye.
And Chair Zomber.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. Oh, that's so exciting. Thank you, and just thank you to the students for your advocacy and bringing it forward, and to Mr. Valdez for working to get us the student feedback. I know we got the feedback before the meeting, so that was really helpful. Thank you so much for your work on this.
And if I may, I just want to note that Mr. Jacobs also brought to me the idea that the private industry council and some others might be willing to back that stipend piece and support
Oh.
our students. So thought
That's
I would
great.
mention that.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Item 1 is action on a request to revise the Audit Advisory Committee Charter. The recommendation is that the board approve the changes to the Audit Advisory Committee Charter as attached.
Thank you. Would the Office of Accountability and Efficiency, oh, I'm sorry. Well, you presented the item. Okay, would the Office of Accountability and Efficiency like to comment?
Thank you, Chair Zombar. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. It's always hard to follow such well-spoken students, but I'm going to try to do my best following them. The item before you is part of an interrelated pair of updates this evening. The first is some refinements to what the board approved for the committee charter for the Advisory Audit Committee back in March. Specifically, if you look at the red line, you can see that we're emphasizing its role as an advisory committee that has implications to existing board policy about advisory committees, which lends itself to the second item on the agenda. But additionally, it also reaffirms the reporting to the board through the Accountability, Finance, and Personnel Committee, otherwise known as AF&P, and then you'll see some additional language there which captures some activity of the evening that came forward related to the board's appointment of a nominee. With that, Mr. Paul Geib, Chief Auditor, and I are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public who wish to make comments?
We do not on this item.
Okay. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Okay. Oh, Director Herndon, no? Did I see your hand? Okay. What is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? Director Herndon.
Madam Chair, I move the recommendation of the Accountability, Finance, and Personnel Committee, Accountability and Efficiency, I'm sorry. On the recommendation, we had discussed this for quite some time. For the most part, I would say we feel that it's an excellent idea. in light of some of the actions that have occurred in the past. So I move approval.
Okay, and just for clarification, this is for the Audit Advisory Committee Charter.
Correct.
Right? Okay. All right, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Herndon's motion to approve the recommendation of the Office of Accountability and Efficiency with regards to revising the Audit Advisory Committee Charter, Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Vanoy.
Aye.
And Chair Zomber.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Item 2 is consideration of and possible action on restructuring the charges of the Committees on Parent and Community Engagement and Student Achievement and School Innovation. The recommendation is that the board determine how it wishes to proceed.
Would the Office of Board Governance please present the item? Oh.
Madam Chair,
Oh,
point of
that's not-
privilege, I
yeah,
think
that's
we
not the
may
right
have
item.
skipped to another meeting from the future.
Or from the past, actually. Would the Office of Board Governance please,
Okay, I am going
Item
to
2?
read the other
Thank
item
you.
2, which is action on a request to approve revisions to Board Governance Policy 2.10, Board Advisory Committees.
thank you. And then would the Office of Accountability and Efficiency please present the item?
Thank you, Chair Zombour. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. As I had mentioned, with respect to the first item, there were implications related to the membership of the Audit Advisory Committee. Specifically, we had expanded the membership base to include residents of the Milwaukee County. As you can see in our Board Advisory Committee language that existed previously, it was limited to citizens of the residents of Milwaukee. There was a provision to provide an override of that based on a majority vote of the full board, but we thought that we could arrive in a better place and have no conflict between charter and committee language here, the policy language, to simply allow for different membership if it was approved in the charter by the board. So we think this is a good way to bring those pieces into alignment, and that's where we ask for your approval.
Thank you so much for that clarification and making these revisions. Do we have any members of the public who wish to make comments?
We do not on this item.
Okay. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Okay. What is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? Director O'Halloran.
I move approval of the recommendation of the Office of Accountability and Efficiency as it pertains to the revisions of the attached item.
Okay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the recommendation of the Office of Accountability and Efficiency with regards to the revision of Governance Policy 2.10, Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Vanoy.
Aye.
Chair Zomber.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Item 3, we have already gone through. Item 3, so Madam Chair, that was the last item on this meeting's agenda.
The chair will remind the listening audience that the meeting of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Budget will begin shortly after this meeting adjourns. There being no further business before the committee, this meeting is adjourned.